Getting over someone you never even dated hurts in a way that's hard to explain, because there was no breakup, no ending conversation, no moment where things officially stopped. You just stood there, hoping something would happen. You didn't lose a relationship, you lost the idea of what it could have been. I remember not being able to move on because nothing bad actually happened. They didn't do anything wrong, they didn't hurt me on purpose, they just never chose me. And somehow that made it harder, because how do you grieve something that never really existed? I stayed stuck for a while, not texting, not reaching out, but also not letting go, just replaying moments, overanalyzing small signs, wondering if I waited too long or didn't do enough. But here's the truth I didn't want to accept back then. Sometimes the reason you can't get over someone is because you never let yourself fully face what actually happened. They weren't taken from you. They didn't slip away. They simply didn't step forward. And accepting that is where healing actually starts. The reason it hurts so much is because there was never clarity. No yes, no no, just enough connection to keep you hoping. So your mind filled in the blanks, you imagined conversations that never happened, moments that could have happened, a version of them that only existed in your head, and when it ended, or never even started, you weren't just letting go of a person, you were letting go of a future you already lived in mentally. That's why people say, but you never even dated, like it's supposed to hurt less, but almost hurt differently. There was no closure, no clean ending, just unanswered questions that kept you stuck longer than you wanted to be. I remember standing still for too long, not moving forward, not opening up to anyone else, because a part of me was still waiting for something that wasn't coming. And here's the hard truth I had to learn. If someone wanted to be with you, you wouldn't be confused. If they were meant to choose you, you wouldn't be stuck guessing. Sometimes the closure you're waiting for is simply accepting that their inaction was the answer. What keeps you stuck isn't the person, it's the what if. What if you had tried harder? What if you said something sooner? What if the timing was different? Those questions replay because they never got answered. And as long as you hold on to them, you stay emotionally frozen. I realized I wasn't holding on to them. I was holding on to the version of myself that hoped something would finally happen. Letting go meant accepting that nothing was guaranteed just because I felt something deeply. And that was hard, because hope feels safer than disappointment. At least hope keeps the door cracked open. But healing didn't start until I closed that door myself. Not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. I had to accept that waiting was costing me more than letting go ever would. You don't move on by getting answers from them. You move on by deciding you deserve clarity, even if you have to give it to yourself. One of the hardest parts is blaming yourself for how it ended. You replay everything you did, everything you didn't do, every moment you stayed quiet when you wish you spoke up. You tell yourself maybe if you were more confident, more patient, more something, things would have been different. I did that for a long time. I carried responsibility for an outcome I didn't actually control, because here's the part that's hard to accept. You can't talk someone into choosing you. You can't time something perfectly enough to create commitment, and you can't make effort appear where it never existed. What happened wasn't a failure on your part, it was a mismatch in intention. You were open. You were present. You were ready for something real. They weren't. And that doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means you were offering something they weren't capable of meeting. Healing started when I stopped asking, what did I do wrong? And started asking, why did I stay so long hoping they'd change? Detaching is hard because there was never anything to undo. No breakup to process, no final argument to point to, just feelings that stayed longer than the situation did. I had to learn that detaching didn't mean pretending I never cared. It meant accepting that caring didn't mean I was owed more. I stopped checking for signs, stopped rereading old messages, stopped asking myself if today would be the day they finally reached out. Not all at once, slowly. Because every time I looked back, I was reopening something that never fully opened to begin with. The truth is, you don't detach by becoming cold. You detach by becoming honest about what kept you attached. For me, it was the hope that one day they'd show up differently, but people don't change because you wait. They change because they want to. And when I accepted that, I didn't lose something. I got myself back. Time alone didn't heal it for me. I thought if I waited long enough, the feelings would fade on their own, but time without honesty just turned into distance with attachment still intact. What actually helped was facing the part of me that stayed stuck. I wasn't holding on to them. I was holding on to the version of myself that believed patience would turn into love. So I had to grieve properly, not the person, but the hope, the imagined conversations, the future that never started, the belief that if I stayed still long enough, something would finally move. Healing started when I stopped romanticizing the waiting and started honoring what it cost me, my time, my energy, my openness to people who actually showed up. You don't heal this kind of hurt by distracting yourself. You heal it by telling yourself the truth about what you were really holding on to and choosing to release it. The real turning point was forgiving myself for waiting, for hoping, for seeing potential, and calling it patience. I used to beat myself up for it, like loving quietly was something to be ashamed of, but it wasn't weakness. It was proof that I cared deeply in a situation that never asked me to stop. I had to forgive myself for staying longer than I should have, because I didn't know any better back then. You can't heal while you're still punishing yourself for having feelings. Once I stopped saying I was stupid for that and started saying I did the best I could with what I knew, everything softened. Because growth isn't about regret, it's about learning without hardening your heart. And forgiving yourself is what finally allows you to let someone go without taking pieces of yourself with them. Opening your heart again is scary after something like that. Not because you're closed off, but because you're afraid of repeating the same pain. I noticed I was comparing everyone new to the person who never chose me. How they talked, how they made me feel, how much potential I imagined, and that comparison kept me stuck because I wasn't meeting new people as they were. I was measuring them against a version of someone that never actually existed. What helped was realizing this. You don't miss them. You miss how you felt when hope was still alive, and no one new can compete with a fantasy that was never tested by reality. Opening your heart again doesn't mean forcing yourself to feel something. It means letting go of comparisons and allowing someone to show up without carrying the weight of your past. The right connection won't make you feel like you're trying to replace someone. They'll feel new, different, grounded. And when that happens, you'll realize you weren't broken. You were just holding on to something that never had the chance to fully exist. The hardest thing to let go of is the way you romanticize the almost. You remember the good moments clearly, the conversations that felt deep, the small signs that made you believe something real was building, but you forget the stillness, the waiting, the lack of follow-through, the way you were always paused while they kept moving forward. I had to stop rewriting the story to make it softer than it really was, because the truth is, if it was meant to become something, it wouldn't have stayed unfinished. Romanticizing the almost keeps you emotionally attached to a version of events that never fully happened. And as long as you keep calling it what could have been, you delay what can be. Seeing it clearly didn't make me bitter. It made me free, because once I stopped idealizing the almost, I stopped missing. And I finally made room for something that wouldn't leave me guessing. Rebuilding self-trust was the part no one talks about. After waiting on someone who never stepped up, I started questioning myself, my judgment, my instincts, my ability to read people correctly. I kept thinking, how did I miss it? How did I let myself stay that long? But the truth is, you didn't fail yourself by hoping. You hurt yourself by ignoring what you already felt. Your intuition knew before your heart accepted it. You felt the imbalance. You noticed the effort wasn't equal. You just didn't want it to be true yet. Rebuilding self-trust didn't mean becoming colder or more guarded. It meant promising myself that next time I'd listen sooner, that I wouldn't silence discomfort just to keep a connection alive, that I'd believe patterns over potential. And once I did that, I stopped seeing that situation as a mistake. I saw it as a lesson that taught me how to choose myself without abandoning my softness, Letting go doesn't mean forgetting, it means you stop carrying the weight into places it doesn't belong. For a while, I thought moving on meant erasing them from my mind. Like one day I'd wake up and feel nothing at all. Well, that's not how it worked. What changed was the emotional chart. The memories stopped hurting. The thoughts stopped pulling me back. They became neutral, just moments, not anchored. I didn't need to pretend it never mattered. I just stopped letting it define me. Moving forward meant releasing the story I kept telling myself about why it didn't work. I wasn't rejected, I wasn't forgotten, I wasn't unchosen because I lacked something. It just wasn't mutual. And once I accepted that, I didn't have to carry resentment or sadness or unfinished emotion into something. Letting go isn't dramatic, it's quiet. It's the moment you realize you can remember something without wanting to return to it. And that's when you know you're finally free. That experience changed the way I love, but not in the way I was afraid it would. I didn't become cold. I didn't stop feeling deeply. I didn't close myself off. I became clear. I stopped romanticizing effort that wasn't there. I stopped confusing silence with mystery. I stopped calling uncertainty patience. Loving someone who never fully chose me taught me the difference between connect and attachment. Attachment waits, connection moves. Attachment hopes someone will become ready. Connection meets you where you are. And once I understood that, I didn't lose my softness. I protected it. Now, when I feel something for someone, I pay attention to how it's meant. Not how intense it feels, but how real it is. Because love isn't proven by how long you can wait. It's proven by how willingly someone shows up. And that lesson, as painful as it was, made the way I love now healthier, calmer, and more honest. What I didn't realize at the time was that this kind of heartbreak was preparing not for more pain, but for clarity. When you've loved someone who never fully chose you, you learn what uncertainty feels like. And once you know that feeling, you stop accepting it as normal. You stop mistaking silence for death. You stop confusing inconsistency with mystery. You stop calling emotional distance something you just need to be patient with. That experience sharpened my awareness. Now, when someone is interested, I can feel there's no guessing, no waiting for signs, no holding my breath between moments. Because real interest doesn't leave you suspended, it moves toward you. And the love that comes after an almost feels different in the best way. It's calm, clearer, more grounded, not because you care less, but because you finally know what you don't want to feel again. That's how you know you're healed. Not when the memory disappears, but when it no longer sets the standard for what you accept. One of the last things I had to unlearn was measuring new connections against old pain. I didn't even realize I was doing it at first. I'd meet someone and immediately check for warning signs, not because they were there, but because I was afraid of feeling that way again. So I stayed guarded, a little distant, waiting for the moment things would fall apart. But protecting yourself too hard can start to look like closing. What helped was understanding that healing doesn't mean pretending the past didn't affect you. It means not letting it decide your future. You don't have to rush trust. You don't have to force openness. But you also don't have to assume every new connection will end the same. Healthy love feels different than what you lost. It doesn't trigger the same anxiety. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't make you question your place. And when you feel that difference, you don't need to compare. Your body already knows. You don't realize you're over them all at once. There's no big moment, no announcement, no sudden absence of thought. It's subtle. You stop checking for their name. You stop wondering what they think. You stop replaying conversations that never actually happened. Not because you forced yourself to move on, but because you grew past the weight. I remember the moment it clicked. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done. Not in a bitter way, in a peaceful way. I realized I wasn't holding space for them anymore. I was holding space for myself. And that's how you know you've healed. When the idea of them no longer feels bigger than the life you're building. When you don't need closure because clarity already settled, you didn't lose. You outgrew the version of yourself that was willing to stand still for someone who never stepped forward. What surprised me the most was how much safer love felt afterward. I thought this experience would make me afraid, more guarded, less willing to open. But it did the opposite, because now I know what misalignment feels like, and I know I don't have to stay in. I don't panic at silence anymore. I don't chase clarity from people who aren't off. I trust myself to walk away before I abandon my need. That makes future love feel safe, not scary. Because safety isn't about certainty, right? It's about knowing you'll choose yourself no matter how things turn. When you've healed from an almost, you don't cling as tight. You allow connection to build naturally. You let people show you who they are, and you trust that you'll be okay even if something ends. That confidence changes everything. You're no longer dating from fear of loss. You're dating from self-respect. And that's where healthy love actually begins. Loving again after an almost isn't starting over. It's starting wide. You don't love less. You love with more awareness. You notice effort soon. You feel when something is mutual. You recognize peace without mistaking it for boredom. You're not rushing connection anymore. Not because you're afraid, but because you finally trust time. You don't attach to words, you watch actions. You don't wait for potential to turn into effort. And that doesn't make you guarded, it makes you grounded. Because now, you know the difference between chemistry and consistency, between hope and alignment, between waiting and choosing. Loving again feels different when you've healed from something it feels more intense. Not because you lowered your standards, but because you raised yourself. The love that comes after an almost feels quiet. And at first that can feel unfamiliar. There's no emotional roller, no long pauses filled with hope or anxiety. Just quiet love doesn't rush. It doesn't confuse. It doesn't make you question where you stand. And when you've been attached to uncertainty before, that calm can feel strange. But strange doesn't mean wrong. It means your nervous system isn't in survival mode anymore. You're not waiting for a reply to feel okay. You're not replaying moments to look for meaning. And that's when you realize something. Love was never supposed to feel like tension. It was never meant to keep you on it. The quiet isn't emptiness, it's safe. And once you learn to recognize that, you stop craving chaos and start choosing peace without feeling like you're missing. The final shift happens when you stop seeing the almost as a... For a long time, I thought it was something taken, a missed chance, something that slipped through my hand. But it wasn't a loss, it was redirect. If that situation had turned into something real, I would have learned much later what I was already being shown early. The uncertainty, the waiting, the imbalance, the almost didn't waste my time. It showed me what staying too long in possibility instead of reality feels. And that lesson changed how I moved. I no longer stay where effort isn't mutual. I no longer pause my life hoping someone will catch, because I learned that love doesn't ask you to stand still. So when I look back now, I don't feel sadness, I feel gratitude, not for the pain, but for the clarity it gave. That almost didn't break. It redirected me towards something that wouldn't leave me waiting. Getting over someone you never even isn't proof that you lost something. It's proof that you grew. You learned how to sit with feelings without chasing, how to let go without needing explanation, how to choose yourself even when nothing officially ended. That kind of growth is cool. No one sees the nights you had to be honest about what you were holding on. But it changed. You stop waiting for people to choose. You stop romanticizing. You stop standing still hoping someone will. And one day, without forcing it, you realize something. You're no longer attached to what never, not because it didn't, but because it taught you what. You didn't get over them by replacing. You got over them by becoming someone who no longer settles for almost. And that's not heart. That's a line. What people don't tell you is that this kind of healing changes how you see yourself. You stop asking why someone didn't choose and start noticing how often you abandoned yourself while you realize you weren't asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong person. And that realization is but powerful, because once you see it, you don't go back. You don't wait in silence anymore. You don't stay stuck in all. You don't confuse hope with connection. You move, not angrily, not dramatically, just forward. And one day someone will meet you without hesitation, without confusion, without making you stand. And you'll understand why nothing before them ever. Not because you weren't ready, but because you were being prepared to recognize something real when it finally shows up. After you let go of someone you never even dated, something strange happens. Life gets quiet, not empty, just quiet. You're not waiting anymore, not hoping someone circles. And at first that silence feels uncomfortable because you got used to carrying something but then you notice the difference. Your energy comes back, your focus comes. You start choosing things without mentally leaving space for someone. That's when you realize how much of yourself you were holding. Letting go doesn't just free you from it frees you from the version of you that was always. And once you feel that, you don't rush, you protect it, because now you know what it costs to wait for someone who never steps. After you let go, you start noticing how different your standard, not higher and allow. Just you don't entertain confusion anymore. You don't explain your needs 10 times. You don't stay where effort feels off. And it's not because you're bitter. It's because you remember what it felt like to wait inside. You remember how much energy it took to hold space for someone who never fully arrived. So now when someone shows up, your body recognizes it immediately. You don't argue with yourself. You don't make excuses for them. You don't romanticize. You just move quietly, without needing closure. Letting go didn't harden you. It's sharp. You didn't lose. You just stop placing it in places where it couldn't. Being the introvert in the relationship means loving someone who lives louder than you do. They talk easily, they fill rooms, they connect fast, and you listen, you observe. You need quiet to recharge after loving hard. Sometimes it feels like you're standing next to someone who shines effortlessly while you glow quietly. They want to go out, you want to stay in, they gain energy from people, you lose it even when you're happy. And the hardest part is not the difference. It's wondering if your quiet way of loving is enough, because you don't always say everything, you don't always show excitement loudly, but when you choose someone, you choose them deeply. Being the introvert doesn't mean you love less. It means you love in a way that's calm, steady, and intentional, and sometimes that gets misunderstood. Being with an extrovert means watching them move through the world with ease. They make friends everywhere, they're invited everywhere, people are drawn to them naturally, and sometimes standing next to that, you wonder where you fit, not because they make you feel small, but because you don't take up space the same way. They thrive in crowds. You count the minutes until you can recharge. They talk things out loud. You process everything internally first, and there are moments where you feel guilty for needing quiet after a long day of loving them. You worry that asking for space sounds like distance, that needing alone time sounds like disinterest, but the truth is, your silence isn't absence. It's how you stay present without burning out. Loving loudly isn't the only way to love deeply, and being quieter doesn't mean you're less committed. It just means your love lives in steadiness, not spotlight. The unspoken fear is that one day you won't be enough, that they'll want more noise, more people, more energy than you can give. You worry they'll mistake your calm for boredom, your need for quiet for distance. You love them deeply but not loudly, and sometimes you wonder if that difference will matter too much. You don't compete for attention, you don't need constant stimulation, you just want connection that feels safe and real. The fear isn't that they'll leave, it's that they'll outgrow you without realizing you were loving them in the only way that feels honest to you. But loving quietly doesn't mean loving less. It means choosing them without the performance. It means staying without needing the room to notice. The right partner won't need you to be louder, they'll need you to be you. Introverts love deeply in ways that aren't always obvious. You remember details, you notice shifts in mood, you feel things before they're said. While they're talking to the room, you're paying attention to them. You're the one who listens after the party ends, the one who creates calm when everything feels loud, the one who offers presence instead of constant stimulation. Your love shows up in consistency. not volume, in choosing the same person again and again, even when it's quiet, even when no one's watching. And often your extroverted partner doesn't realize how much they need that until life gets overwhelming, until they're tired, until the noise fades, until they need someone who knows how to stay still with them. That's when your kind of love becomes the anchor. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. Introverts and extroverts can work beautifully together, but only when both ways of loving are respected. You don't need to become louder to be enough for them, and they don't need to become quieter to be right for you. What matters is understanding that your need for space isn't rejection, that their need for people isn't avoidance. You recharge differently, but you can still meet in the middle. When an extrovert learns that quiet isn't distance, and an introvert learns that excitement isn't chaos, something soft happens. You stop trying to fix each other, you start protecting each other, you give them grounding, they give you expansion, and suddenly, the difference that once felt like a risk becomes the balance that makes the relationship work. Asking for space doesn't mean you love them less. It means you know yourself. Introverts don't pull away to create distance. They pull away to come back whole. But asking for that space can feel heavy. You worry it sounds like rejection. You worry they'll take it personally. You worry needing time alone makes you difficult to love. The right partner won't hear, "I need space," as "I don't want you." They'll hear it as, "I'm taking care of myself so I can show up better." You don't need to apologize for how you recharge. You don't need to explain it every time. Love doesn't require constant closeness to be real. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is step back for a moment, not to disconnect, but to return as yourself. Introverts show love in quiet, steady ways. You remember the little things they forget they mentioned. You notice when their mood shifts before they say anything. You check in without being asked. Your love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's making space for them after a long day. It's choosing them in calm moments, not just exciting ones. It's staying present when things slow down. Sometimes you wish they could see it more clearly, not because you need praise, but because your love doesn't always announce itself. But the right partner will feel it. They'll feel it in how safe they are with you, and how calm things get around you, and how you stay, even when nothing exciting is happening. Quiet love isn't invisible. It's just not performing, and the people who value depth will always recognize it. It's easy to compare yourself to an extroverted partner, to wonder why you don't light up rooms, why you don't want constant plans, why loving quietly feels like a disadvantage. But your quiet nature isn't something to fix, it's something that brings balance. You offer depth in a world of noise, you offer presence in a world of distraction, you offer steadiness when everything else feels fast. You don't compete for attention, you create connection. And when you stop comparing, something shifts. You stop shrinking next to their energy. You stop questioning your value. You stop feeling like you need to match them to be worthy of love. You realize your calm isn't less than their excitement, so it gives the relationship somewhere to rest. And the right partner won't ask you to be louder. They'll thank you for being grounding. One of the quiet fears is being replaced by louder energy, by someone more outgoing, more exciting, more effortless in social spaces. You worry that your calm won't be enough forever. But the truth is, people don't stay for volume. They stay for how they feel when everything slows down. An extroverted partner may enjoy attention, but they rest in safety. They recharge in understanding. They stay where they feel accepted without having to perform, and that's where you shine. You offer a place where they don't have to impress anyone, where they can be tired, where they can be real. Loud energy is easy to find, steady presence is not, and the partner who truly values you won't look for replacement. They'll recognize that your quiet way of loving is exactly what makes the relationship feel secure. Being the introvert was never a disadvantage. It just doesn't announce itself. Your love lasts because it isn't fueled by excitement alone. It's built on presence, on listening, on staying when things are quiet and ordinary. You don't love for the room, you love for the person. And that kind of love doesn't fade when the noise does. The right partner won't ask you to be louder, faster, or different. They'll appreciate that with you. Love feels steady instead of overwhelming, safe instead of performative. So if you've ever felt like your quiet nature made you harder to love, it didn't. It made you the place someone can finally rest. And that's not less, that's rare. Loving quietly doesn't mean loving halfway. It means you choose depth over display. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most meaningful presence in someone's life. The right partner won't measure love by energy levels. They'll feel it in consistency, in safety, in how calm it feels to be with you. And one day you'll realize something simple. simple. Your quiet wasn't something they had to tolerate. It was the reason they felt at home. I don't care how corny it sounds, I'll never stop being a lover boy. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there is no one else, no distractions, no half interest, just one person in a world that feels smaller because of it. I want that kind of love where it doesn't wander, where nobody else even registers, where loving them feels natural, not forced. The kind of love that feels cinematic without trying. Just two people driving nowhere, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around acting indifferent to that. Love is something casual, like it doesn't matter, because love is everything. Sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, knowing their moods, understanding them in ways nobody else does. Going from strangers to someone you can't imagine life without, there's nothing like it. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the heartbreak, I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the risk. The lover boy in me isn't dying. It can't. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply. It's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is embarrassing, like wanting someone fully is something you should hide. They call it nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to act like I wouldn't be crushed if I lost someone I care about. I want to feel it. I want the kind of love where my heart is all the way in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah, that makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered, because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. But I am. And I'm not gonna dull that part of me just to fit into a world that treats love like it's optional. Loving this way hurts more because you don't do it halfway. You don't keep one foot out the door. You don't love with conditions. You don't calculate how much to give. When you fall completely. And that means when things don't work out, it hits harder. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already imagined, the places you pictured going together, the version of yourself that only existed with them. People say, I don't get your hopes up, protect your care less, but that's never been you. You don't know how to want someone quietly, you don't know how to love without meaning it, and you don't want to learn, because even when it hurts, loving deeply still feels better than pretending you don't care. Yeah, heartbreak changes you. It slows you down, makes you cautious for a while, but it never kills that part of you that believes in something more. And that's the difference. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because that's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd rather feel everything than live a life that feels empty. The truth is, you already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back, and still you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection, you're chasing connection. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. The kind that turns ordinary moments into memories. The kind that makes you feel seen in ways words can't explain. People say love like that is unrealistic, that it only exists in movies or stories, but you've felt glimpses of it, enough to know it's real, and once you've felt that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway when you say you want that kind of love. You're not talking about perfection. You're not chasing fantasy or some unrealistic fairy tale ending. You're talking about presence, the kind of love where you don't feel alone even when you're silent, where being together feels natural, not forced, where effort doesn't feel like work. Is waking up and knowing there's one person in the world who chooses you without hesitation, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's traveling with no plan and still feeling grounded, standing in open spaces and realizing the world feels fuller just because they're next to you. It's loyalty without fear, commitment without control, love that feels intense but never unsafe. That's the kind of love you want. Not obsession, not possession, connection. The kind where you don't question intentions, you don't wonder where you stand, you don't compete with distractions, you're just there, fully, openly chosen, and wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. Waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept less than what they feel. They grow distant, they grow quiet, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you don't want that. You don't want a love that feels convenient. You don't want someone who chooses you only when it's easy. You want someone who stays when it's real, when it's messy, when it requires effort. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you love, you know how much you give, and you know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. You'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone who doesn't meet you where you stand. And yeah, some days it gets heavy, watching people pair off, watching others settle into relationships that look fine on the surface, but deep down, you're not jealous. You're patient, because you're not searching for company, you're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch at your intensity, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't treat your loyalty like it's replaceable. You're waiting for someone who wants the same kind of love you do, all in, no exits, and until that shows up, you're not lowering your standards, you're protecting your heart. If it ever happens, when someone finally matches your energy, you'll feel the difference immediately. Not fireworks, not chaos, not anxiety disguised as excitement, clarity. You won't question where you stand. You won't wonder if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. It'll feel mutual in a way you're not used to. They won't flinch at your intensity. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't act overwhelmed by the way you love. They'll meet it. Your effort won't scare them. It'll reassure them. Your loyalty won't feel rare. It'll feel natural. And the craziest part, you won't feel like you're chasing anything. No convincing. No proving, no waiting for them to catch up emotionally. They'll already be there. And suddenly, all that waiting makes sense. All the times you didn't settle, all the times you walked away, all the times you chose being alone over being half loved. You'll realize you weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. When someone finally loves you the way you've always loved others, it won't feel overwhelming. It'll feel right. At the end of everything, after the waiting, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the almost, one thing never leaves: your capacity to love. You don't lose it, even when people try to convince you that you should, even when the world rewards detachment, even when acting unbothered looks easier, even when caring deeply costs you more than you expected, because loving fully was never a phase for you. It's part of who you are. You were built to feel things deeply, to choose one person and mean it, to love in a way that's intentional, loyal, and complete. And yeah, that makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you real. The lover boy in you survives every heartbreak, not because you forget the pain, but because you decide it's not stronger than your heart. You don't regret loving, you don't regret believing, you don't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your intensity. They won't treat your love like it's extra. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it, and when that happens, everything you held on to will make sense. So no, the lover boy in you doesn't die, he just waits. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready. Unrequited love is a quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't make noise. It just sits with you. It's loving someone who laughs with you, but never looks at you the way you look at them. They're comfortable around you. They trust you. They tell you things. And every time they talk about someone else, you smile, while something inside you cracks just a little more. You learn how to swallow words before they escape, compliments you never say, feelings you never confess, because deep down you already know the answer, so you love them quietly. You notice everything about them, their habits, their moods, the small details nobody else pays attention to, knowing full well you'll never live in their memory the way they live in yours. Somehow you convince yourself it's okay, that being close to them, even like this, is better than being without them at all. You give without expecting, you care without being chosen, you love without being loved back, and that hurts in ways you can't explain, but unrequited love teaches you something too. It shows you how deep your heart really is, how much you're capable of feeling, even when nothing is returned. Just don't disappear inside someone who can't meet you where you are, because one day someone will, and they'll give back everything you once gave away in silence. The hardest part about unrequited love isn't just that they don't feel the same, it's that they're close enough to keep the hope alive. They don't reject you outright, they don't shut the door, they just exist in your life. They text you, they lean on you, they laugh with you, and every small moment feels like maybe you're not imagining it. So you hold on. You tell yourself you're being patient. That timing is the issue, that one day they'll see what you feel so clearly, but deep down, you know you're waiting for something they never promised. And that's why it's so hard to leave, because unrequited love doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like unfinished business. You don't walk away angry, you walk away confused. You wonder if you should have said more, if you should have been quieter, if you waited too long, or tried too hard, and instead of letting go, you stay emotionally tethered, not because you're weak, but because your heart hasn't been given a clean ending, so it keeps hoping, keeps replaying moments, keeps searching for signs that maybe you still matter to them in that way, and that hope is what keeps the pain alive. You begin to wonder why you're always the one feeling more, why you're always the one waiting, why love seems so easy for others but feels just out of reach for you. You start shrinking your needs, telling yourself you don't want much anyway, convincing yourself that loving quietly is enough, but it's not, because caring without being chosen slowly teaches your heart that it should settle for less. You catch yourself doing things just to stay close, being extra understanding, always available, always forgiving. Not because you're weak, but because you're afraid that asking for more will push them away completely. So you accept crumbs and call it connection, and the longer this goes on, the more invisible you start to feel, not just to them, but to yourself. You forget what it feels like to be desired, to be someone's first choice, to be loved out loud, and that's the quiet danger of unrequited love. It doesn't just hurt you, it slowly teaches you to disappear. There's a reason unrequited love is so hard to walk away from. Not just love, it's anticipation. You live in the space of almost chosen, almost wanted, almost enough. Your brain starts clinging to small moments. A long conversation, a shared laugh, a look that might mean something, and those moments keep you hooked, because when love isn't returned, your mind fills in the gaps with possibility. You imagine what could be instead of facing what is, and every time you think about letting go, you feel like you're giving up on a future that was never actually promised. So you stay hopeful, you stay available, you stay emotionally invested, not because it feels good, but because walking away feels like loss, even though nothing was ever yours. That's the trap. Unrequited love keeps you chasing closure from someone who doesn't know they're holding it, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to separate love from longing. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself that believed it might work. At some point you feel it, the imbalance, you realize you're giving more than you're receiving, and then emotionally, mentally, quietly. You're investing energy into someone who isn't investing back. You plan around them, you think about them, you hold space for them, and they just live their life. That's when it starts to hurt differently. Not sharp pain, but exhaustion. You're tired of wondering, tired of hoping, tired of pretending you're okay with crumbs. You notice how much of yourself is tied up in someone who doesn't even know how deeply you care. And for the first time, you ask yourself a hard question. If nothing changes, then how long can I keep doing this? Because loving someone in silence means you never get reassurance, never get clarity, never get chosen, and slowly, it teaches your heart that effort doesn't lead to safety, that love means waiting, that closeness means sacrifice, and that's not fair to you. Love isn't supposed to drain you. It isn't supposed to make you feel invisible. It isn't supposed to cost you your sense of worth. And realizing that is the beginning of letting go, even if your heart isn't ready yet. Letting go doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels wrong. It feels like you're giving up on someone you care about, like you're betraying something that meant a lot to you, even if it was never returned. You start questioning yourself. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Did I just keep loving them quietly like before? Because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means losing the hope you've been holding on to. And hope is hard to release. You've built routines around them, emotions around them, a future that only existed in your head but still felt real. So choosing yourself feels like cruelty at first, like you're the one causing the pain, but staying was hurting you too. Just slower, just quieter. And that's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes self-respect feels like grief. Sometimes growth feels like loss. Sometimes choosing yourself feels worse than continuing to wait. But guilt doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you cared deeply. And caring deeply doesn't obligate you to keep hurting yourself in silence. After you finally choose yourself, something unexpected happens. It feels empty, not peaceful, not freeing, just quiet in a way that's uncomfortable. You're no longer waiting for their message, no longer replaying conversations, no longer building your day around the possibility of them. And at first, that absence hurts more than the waiting did, because unrequited love filled space. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It gave your heart something to hold on to, even if it was hurting you. Though when it's gone, you don't immediately feel relief. You feel loss. You miss the closeness. You miss the routine. You even miss the hope, as painful as it was. And that makes you question your decision. You wonder if you left too early, if you should have tried harder, if loneliness is worse than longing. But this part matters, because this emptiness isn't failure, it's withdrawal. Your heart is unlearning a pattern, and unlearning always feels uncomfortable before it feels right. You didn't lose love, you made room for it, even if nothing has filled that space yet. One day after the emptiness settles, something shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. You start noticing how much lighter you feel without carrying love alone. You realize how much energy you used to spend hoping, waiting, adjusting, shrinking, all for someone who never met you where you stood. And for the first time, you don't miss them. You miss the idea of being chosen. That's an important difference, because now you know what it feels like to give deeply, and you also know what it costs when nothing comes back. So when love shows up again one day, it feels different. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't ask you to love in silence. It meets you halfway. You don't have to hide how much you care. You don't have to settle for almost. You don't have to convince yourself that crumbs are enough. And that's when you understand something fully. Unrequited love wasn't wasted. It taught you the depth of your heart. It proved you're capable of loving purely, selflessly, fully. But it was never meant to be your ending, because love isn't meant to be endured alone. It's meant to be shared. And one day, someone will choose you as openly as you choose them. No silence, no guessing, no imbalance, just love. They say your second love hits the deepest. And at first I didn't believe that. I thought nothing could touch the intensity of the first one. The first love is loud. It's reckless. It's the kind of love that makes you believe everything will work out just because you feel it so strongly. You fall without thinking. You trust without fear. You don't even know what heartbreak really is yet, so you give everything freely. But the second love comes after reality has already introduced itself. It comes after disappointment, after the nights where you questioned your worth, after you learned that love doesn't always stay no matter how hard you try. So this time, you don't rush, you don't dive in head first, you hesitate, you analyze, you protect your heart like it's something fragile because now you know it is. And that's what makes the second love different. You don't love blindly anymore, you love intentionally, you pay attention to effort, to consistency, to how someone treats you when it's inconvenient, not just when it's easy. You're still scared, but you're braver in a quieter way. You open up slowly, piece by piece, hoping you won't regret it again. And somehow, it still means more than you expected, because after being broken once, feeling safe again hits different. Feeling chosen without having to beg hits different. Being loved without chaos feels almost unfamiliar at first. You keep waiting for the catch. For the moment it all falls apart, but it doesn't, at least not right away. The second love isn't about butterflies in your stomach. It's about calm in your chest. It's about being understood without having to explain yourself over and over. It's about not feeling anxious when your phone is quiet. It's about knowing where you stand. It's about realizing that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. And even if the second love doesn't last forever, it leaves a different kind of mark. It teaches you what love is supposed to feel like. It shows you that you can love deeply without losing yourself, that you can stay soft without being naive, that healing doesn't mean closing your heart, it means choosing better. Your first love changes you, but your second love reminds you why you didn't give up on love in the first place. And that's why it hurts deeper, because this time you knew what you were risking and you loved anyway. What people don't tell you is that the second love doesn't just affect your heart, it reshapes the way you see everything. You're not the same person you were the first time you fell in love. You're more aware now, more cautious. You've seen how quickly things can change, how someone can promise forever and still walk away. So you love with your eyes open this time. You notice the small things, the tone shifts, the effort levels, the moments where silence says more than words ever could. You're not naive anymore, but you're not closed off either. And that's the dangerous balance, because part of you is still hopeful, still wanting to believe that this time will be different, that maybe this love will be the one that stays. And because you're loving with intention now, when it starts to slip, you feel it immediately. The second love hurts because you don't get blindsided. You see it coming. You sense the distance before it's spoken. You feel the warmth fade before it's gone. You recognize the patterns because you've lived them before, and yet you still stay longer than you should. Not because you're desperate, but because you understand love better now. You know relationships aren't perfect. You know people struggle. You try to be patient. You try to communicate. You try to fix instead of flee. That's what makes it cut deeper when it ends. Because you didn't love blindly. You loved consciously. You loved knowing the risk. The second love doesn't shatter you the way the first one does. It doesn't leave you confused about what went wrong. Instead, it leaves you quietly exhausted. You don't cry as loudly. You don't fall apart as dramatically. You just sit with this heavy realization that sometimes, even when you do things the right way, love can still end. And that's a different kind of pain. It's the pain of knowing you grew, healed, and tried again, and still didn't get the ending you hoped for. But it's also the pain that proves how strong you've become, because even after everything, you are still capable of opening your heart again. That matters more than you think. The second love stays with you in quieter ways, not as chaos, not as obsession, but as reflection. It makes you look at yourself differently, at the way you love, at the boundaries you set, at the parts of you that grew stronger and the parts that are still tender. You don't replay every moment wondering what you did wrong like the first time. Instead, you replay moments wondering how something that felt so healthy could still slip through your fingers, and that's when it hits you. Love isn't a guarantee. Effort doesn't come with insurance. Doing your best doesn't mean you'll always get to keep what you care about. That realization hurts, but it also matures you. You stop romanticizing pain. You stop thinking love has to be hard to be meaningful. You stop chasing people who can't meet you where you are. The second love teaches you discernment. It teaches you that chemistry isn't enough, that timing matters, that two good people can still be wrong for each other in that moment of life. And accepting that is one of the hardest lessons there is. You don't come out of it bitter, at least not if you're honest with yourself. You come out clearer. You know what you want now, what you won't tolerate, what you deserve without needing to explain it to anyone. And even though it didn't last, it didn't fail, it served its purpose. It showed you that love can feel safe, that connection can be calm, that you don't have to lose yourself to be close to someone. The second love doesn't destroy your belief in love, it refines it. It strips away the fantasy and leaves you with truth. And truth, even when it hurts, is always better than illusion. Because now, when love comes again, and it will, you won't be chasing it, you'll be choosing it. What makes the second love linger is how close it came to being right. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't built on illusion. It felt grounded, like something you could grow into, instead of something you were chasing. And that's why letting it go feels so unfair. You did the work this time. You showed up differently. You loved with awareness, and still it slipped away. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You start asking quieter questions. Not why wasn't I enough, but why wasn't this the right time? You realize that love isn't just about effort or intention. It's also about alignment. About two people being ready in the same season of life. And sometimes, no matter how real it feels, the timing just isn't there. The second love teaches you that endings don't always come from betrayal or lack of care. Sometimes they come from growth pulling people in different directions. From life demanding things one person is ready to give and the other isn't yet. And that kind of ending hurts because there's no villain to blame. You don't leave angry, you leave understanding, and that understanding weighs heavy. But here's the quiet truth. The second love doesn't close your heart, it strengthens it. It proves you're capable of loving again without losing yourself. It shows you that healing worked, that you didn't harden, that you didn't shut down. You took the risk again, knowing how badly it could hurt, and that courage matters because love isn't measured by how long it lasts. It's measured by how honestly it's given, and the second love is often the most honest version of you. Not perfect, not fearless, but real, and that's something no ending can take away. The second love changes how you carry yourself afterward. You don't walk away shattered, but you don't walk away untouched either. There's a quiet shift in you. You become softer in some places, stronger in others. You learn how to sit with loss without letting it turn into bitterness, and that balance takes time. You notice how you move differently now. You're slower to give access to your heart, but not closed. You're more honest about what you need, even if it risks someone leaving. You no longer stay silent just to keep the peace, because the second love taught you that losing yourself slowly is worse than losing someone quickly. You also learn that closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from acceptance, from realizing that you gave what you could with what you knew at the time, that both of you tried in the ways you knew how, and that an ending doesn't erase the good that existed. The memories don't hurt the same way anymore. They don't stab, they ache. And even that ache becomes familiar, manageable. It reminds you that you once felt safe with someone, and that means you can feel that way again. Maybe not with them, but with someone else, someday. The second love doesn't leave you afraid to love again. It leaves you prepared. You know what to look for now. You know the difference between attention and effort, between chemistry and compatibility, between wanting someone and being ready to build with them. And when love finds you again, because it will, you won't be chasing the feeling, you'll be recognizing calm, mutual, grounded, something that doesn't ask you to prove your worth or question your place. That's the quiet gift of the second love. It doesn't stay forever, but it stays with you in the way you love next. There's a moment after the second love ends where you realize you're not angry anymore. Not at them, not even at yourself. You're just tired. Tired in a way that only comes from caring deeply and trying your best. And that tiredness forces you to slow down and actually listen to yourself. You start asking different questions now. Not, how do I get them back? But why did I stay when I felt myself shrinking? You become more aware of the moments you ignored your intuition, the times your body knew before your heart was ready to admit it. And instead of beating yourself up for it, you start forgiving yourself for being human. The second love teaches you that loving someone doesn't mean abandoning yourself. That compromise shouldn't feel like self-erasure. That consistency matters more than intensity. And that someone can care about you deeply and still not be capable of loving you in the way you need. You also realize something else that's important. Just because a love ends doesn't mean it failed. Some connections are meant to show you a version of yourself you didn't know existed. A braver version, a more open version, a version that learned how to communicate, how to trust again, how to be vulnerable without losing control. And that version of you doesn't disappear when the relationship ends, it stays. You carry it into every interaction after, into the boundaries you set, into the standards you keep, into the way you walk away sooner when something doesn't feel right instead of forcing yourself to stay. The second love doesn't break you. It refines you. It teaches you how to love without fantasy, without desperation, without fear running the show. And even though it didn't last, it proves something important, that you're capable of loving in a healthy way. And once you know that, you never really lose. After the second love, you stop romanticizing ending. You understand that sometimes things don't fall apart loudly. They fade, they change shape. They quietly reach a point where staying would mean forcing something that's no longer aligned, and accepting that takes more strength than holding on ever did. You learn how to grieve without dramatizing. You let yourself miss them without wishing to undo the ending. You don't demonize what you adjust to make letting go easier. You honor it for what it was, meaningful, imperfect, and real. That kind of honesty with yourself is growth. You also become more intentional with your energy. You don't over-explain your feelings to people who aren't listening. You don't overextend yourself to prove your worth. You save your softness for those who handle it with care, because the second love taught you how valuable that softness actually is, and slowly, without forcing it, you start to feel whole again, not because someone replaced them, but because you learned how to stand on your own with everything you gained from loving. You realize that love didn't take anything from you. It gave you clarity, depth, emotional intelligence you didn't have before. The second love doesn't leave you empty, it leaves you wiser. You understand now that love isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing something real, knowing it could hurt, and still showing up with honesty. And when you're able to do that without losing yourself, that's when love becomes something powerful instead of fragile. You're not the same person you were before them. You're better prepared for what comes next. The second love stays with you not as pain, but as proof that your heart didn't close after being hurt. Proof that you didn't let fear turn you cold. Proof that even after disappointment, you were still willing to try again. And that matters more than whether it lasts, because the goal was never to avoid heartbreak forever. The goal was to love without losing yourself. And the second love showed you that you could be open without being reckless, vulnerable without being naive. You learned how to love with balance, and one day when love comes again, you'll feel the difference immediately. It won't feel rushed, it won't feel heavy, it won't feel like you're walking on eggshells or trying to prove your value. It'll feel mutual, steady, easy in a way that doesn't scare you. You won't be chasing a feeling anymore. You'll be choosing a person, and that's the quiet beauty of the second. It doesn't promise forever, it prepares you. It teaches you that love doesn't need to hurt to be meaningful, and that peace is just as powerful as passion. So if your second love didn't last, don't mourn it like a failure. See it for what it really was. A turning point, a lesson, a reminder that your heart is still capable of real connection. The first love opens your heart. The second love teaches it how to stay open. And whatever comes next, you'll be ready for.